and welcome back to Dark Academia Queen. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite genres ever. I'm excited, y'all. We're doing an Ice Age movie night with some people from work tonight, so I'm so very excited. So I'm slowly getting ready for that. Oh my gosh. But anyway, this is episode 52. Hard to believe we're already on episode 52. Devoted a lot of time to these podcasts. I really need a life. Oh well. I'm an introvert, so this is perfect. I get to talk to a camera, don't have to worry about what other people have to think of me and everything else. Or I have to make conversation with people. You know, my introverts out there, you know what I'm talking about, right? Come on now. I can't be the only one. But anyway, we're going to talk about, if you're new here, hit that like button and ring that bell for notifications. So please subscribe. And y'all, we're 8 days out for my birthday. Can you believe it? 8 days. My friends are coming in Saturday. We're gonna celebrate, so I'm recording as much episodes as I can. Gosh, I'll be 28. Ugh, doesn't sound good. I'm just gonna say repeating 25. Does that sound better? I think so too. Anyway, why don't we jump into this episode, shall we? What is the horror fiction genre? Well, here's the thing. What most of y'all don't know is my mom had me watching horror movies from her from the time for as long as I can remember. So by the time I became immune to them, you know what I mean? Like horror movies today, no effect on me whatsoever. So you watch them so long, you kind of get immune to it, right? It's kind of like you work with stupid people so long, you're kind of immune to stupidity at this point, right? But anyway, horror is a genre of fiction that can extend that is intended to distribute, frighten, or scare. Now, it's also often divided into subgenres from psychological horror to supernatural horror, which are often in the realm of speculative fiction. Such as there is a literary historian, J.A. Godin, in 1984, who has defined the horror story as a piece of fiction in the prose of variable lengths which shocks or even frightens the reader, or perhaps induces a feeling of repulsion or loathing. Horror intends to create an eerie or frightening atmosphere for the readers, often those who, in the central minutes of the work of horror. So, this can be interpreted by a metaphor of a larger fear of society, as well, fears of a society. So, prevalent elements with many I cannot talk for some reason, y'all. I'm getting so excited for Ice Age. By the way, my favorite character is Scrat. What's y'all's favorite character? But anyway, many elements of the horror fiction genre is ghosts, demons, vampires, monsters, zombies, werewolves, the devil, serial killers, hence my true crime love. Extraterrestrial life, don't believe in aliens, by the way. Killer toys, psychopaths, sexual deviancy, um, rape, gore, torture, evil clowns, cults, cannibalism, viciousness, vicious animals, the apocalypse, evil witches, dystopia, and the human-made or natural disasters. Okay, I'm gonna try to calm down now. So, what do we know about the history of horror? Well, the horror genre does have ancient origins, with roots of folklore and religious traditions focusing on the death and the afterlife, and the demonic and principles of the things embodied in the person. He's manifested in the stories of beings such as demons, witches, vampires, werewolves, and ghosts. I have actually talked about some of these already, and I plan to talk a little bit more about some of these later on down the road. I know, especially with the witches and warlocks. Did I talk about the vampires? Yes, I talked about the vampires. I've also don't know if I talked about ghosts or gals yet. But if I didn't, it's on my list. So let's go ahead, clarify. I do have a whole list I've got to get through, so I have like a whole system going. And I'm starting to ramble, and you're probably losing interest and want me to get back to this. Right. Okay. So, European horror fiction became established through ancient Greeks and ancient Romans, and Mary Shelley's well-known novel. Can we guess it? Can we guess it? Frankenstein was greatly influenced by the stories of Hippocrates, whom Aeschylus revives from death, and Euripides, who writes who wrote plays based on the story. and many more. In the Plutarch's Lives of the Noble Cratians and the Romans account of Xenon, the author describes the spirit of a murderer, Damon. Not the Vampire Diaries Damon, but oh my gosh. Klaus is my guy on that one, sorry. But who himself was murdered in a bathhouse in Chamonia. Now, Feeney the Younger also tells of Antonia Canonites who brought a haunted house into Athens. And it was a caution since the house was inexpensive. Now, speaking of haunted houses, I don't know about y'all, but I will buy a house that someone died in. That's real estate gold right there if you stop and truly think about it. Because most people, when they hear a house that someone's died in this house, it's like, oh, we don't want it then. Or it's like, oh, someone died in this house? I don't know if we should buy this house then. Because I have to charge of. So, but anyway, there have been many, such as Vlad the Impaler, who was the inspiration of Dracula and everything. But much horror fiction derives from the most meanest, cruelest personages in the 15th century. Dracula can be traced to the Prince of Walchia of Vlad III, whose alleged war crimes was published in German pamphlets. A 1499 pamphlet was published by Marcus Aurelius, which is notable for the woodcut imagery. The alleged serial killer Gallus de Reyes has been seen as the inspiration for Bluebeard, and the motif of the vampiress, and most notably derived from the real-life noblewoman and murderer Elizabeth Bathory, who helped usher the emergence of the horror fiction in the 18th century, such as through Laszlo Drosho's 1729 book, Tragical Historia. I know I'm probably butchering that up, and for that I apologize. Now, who wrote the first Gothic novel? Well, that would be Horace Walpole, and I do plan on talking about him later on. So keep that name in mind. Okay. But he wrote this in his 1764 book, The Castle of Otranto, initiating a literary genre. The 18th century saw a gradual development of Romanticism in the Gothic horror genre, and it drew on the written and material heritage of the late Middle Ages, finding its form from with Horace Walpole's seminal and controversial 1764 novel *The Castle of Otranto*, in the first edition, was published to disguise the actual medieval poem from Italy, and discovered and republished by a fictitious translator. Once revealed, as many as is found anarchist, reactionary, or simply in poor taste to prove popular. So, what about the 19th century? Well, the Gothic transition blossomed into the genre of modern readers called the horror literature in the 19th century. The most influential is Mary Shelley, of course. Then there's John Paul Hardy's The Vampire, Charles Newton Melmont's The Wanderer, Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, one of my personal faves, by the way. So many amazing artists, authors, even Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Come on now. But what about the 20th century? Well, there was many cheap periodicals around the turn of the century and the boom of horror writing. For example, Gaston Leroux's sexualized his La Femme de Lepra. I'm pretty sure I just butchered that up, and for that I apologize. I took French in high school, but that's been almost 10 years. I'm not gonna say how long it's been because I'm already old. But anyway, but before it became a novel in 1910, and one writer who specialized in horror fiction for his mainstream pulp, such as All Story Magazine with Ted Robbins, whose fiction deals with themes of madness and century. In Russia, there was a writer, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his last name, but it's Alexander Balavid. I said I wasn't going to attempt to pronounce his last name, but I just did. But anyway, um, He popularized these themes with the story of Professor Dowell's Head, in which a mad doctor performs experimental head transplants and reanimations of the bodies stolen from the morgue, which was first published as a magazine serial before it turned into a novel. Very interesting, right? What about the influential horror as well? There have been many inroads in these mediums. Particularly, there's H.P. Lovecraft, there's M.R. James, who is credited with redefining the ghost story in that era. Now, a serial murderer became a recurring theme, yellow journalism, sensationalism, various murderers such as Jack the Ripper. We all know that one pretty well, I believe. Albert Fish, Carl Perkins, um, Ed Gein, even that. Like, come on now. And this has also been seen in early cinema, which has inspired the aspects of many horror literature, as seen as a strong traditional and subgenres. Up until this graphic depiction of commonly associated with 1960s and 70s slasher films and splatter films, which I will get to those in a later episodes. I do promise that is on my list. It's just finding the time to talk about those in my research and everything. But in the 1950s, satisfied readers' quest for horror imagery that the silver screen could not provide. And the imagery made these comics controversial and consequence were frequently censored. Now, the modern zombie tale deals with the motif of the living dead, harks back to H.P. Lovecraft's Cool Air in the Vault and The Outsider, and Dennis Whitley's Strange Conflict. Richard Matheson's I Am a Legend influenced the entire genre of apocalyptic zombie fiction embezzlement in the films of George A. Romero. Now, in the late 1960s and 70s, the enormous commercial success of these three books, Rosemary's Babies by Ira Levin, The Exorcist, and by William Peter Blatty, and the author as well, who's another famous person. We can't talk about horror without talking about Stephen King. And if you go back to, I think it's my Down the Rabbit Hole, or it might be this one where I talked about the Stanley Hotel, which is very important because I plan on talking about Stephen King a little bit later as well. But one of the Stephen King is perhaps one of the best known late 20th century writers, known from Carrie to Shining, It, Misery, and many short stories as well. Now I will say this: the original Carrie was the best one. I don't care what anyone says. Just like the original It was the best one. I know, so people are gonna argue with me on that one, but it's true. What can I say? I'm a girl who knows what I will, who knows what I like and what I won't. Now, what about the best-selling series and the contemporary themes that exist in these genres? Well, there is the werewolf fiction, as well. There's even been like some mashups, genre mashups, such as Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and historical fantasies and historical comics such as Hellblazer and Mike Mignola's Hellboy. I love Hellboy. I'm not like big like Marvels and all of that, but I do like Hellboy. Now, horror also serves as the central genre for more complex modern works such as Mark Z. Daniel Winsky's House of Leaves, which was a finalist for a National Book Award, for crying out loud. But anyway, there's even something called children's horror. It is all known for sure why people enjoy movies. Not saying nothing. It is stereotyped and portrayed as grotesque monsters that fascinate kids. Now, here's the thing. I hate fairy tales. I'm gonna go ahead and say that out loud right now. But I love like the Grimm Brothers fairy tales. Oh my gosh. I can read those all day. But it's like I don't know, like I get tired of happy endings. Like life doesn't have a happy ending. And I guess my childhood's kind of prepared me for that and kind of part of the reason why I like it. I don't know. But anyway, what are some other defining characteristics and traits of the horror genre? Well, it provokes an emotional, psychological, and physical response within the readers that causes them to react with fear. One of H.P. Lovecraft's most famous quotes in that genre is, "The oldest and the strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is unknown." Now, this was the first sentence from his seminal essay, Supernatural Horror in Literature. And science fiction historian Daryl Swartzweiser has stated, in its simplest sense, a horror story is one that scares us. And a true horror story requires us to be a sense of evil, not in necessarily theological sense, but the menaces must be truly menacing, life destroying, and antithetical to happiness as well. But I also want to say this too before I close this episode out. I love Scooby Doo. And the older I get, the more I realize it was in the 70s and 60s, and we both know like some of those like subtle hints that the show implied. We all know, right? But Scooby Doo, it did not teach us anything that monsters aren't real. It's the people that are the monsters. My childhood taught me that too as well. Like, anyway, that is it for this episode. Join me next time as we talk about classism and how it portrays to dark academia.